A man lived alone with his blind daughter, until one snowy morning, he heard a scream in the forest. A stranger caught in a bear trap, and that stranger, without ever hearing her name before, whispered it. How could he have known? And why did shadows start appearing at their windows that night? Don't miss this extraordinary story. If you're ready, let's begin. By the way, we noticed something small. Most people who watch these stories aren't actually subscribed to the channel. Maybe we get caught up in the moment, or just forget to hit the button. But your support truly helps us keep creating stories like this. If this story moved you, don't forget to like the video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to the channel. Jonas Whitmer always drank his morning coffee the same way, quietly, waiting, as if he were watching the past through the cup. The cracks in his hands no longer hid the exhaustion of frozen winters and years gone by. As his tired fingers gripped the chipped mug, the only sound in the room was the soft crackle of a new log Eleanor had tossed into the wood stove. Eleanor was a young woman who couldn't see, but could hear the faintest sounds in the world. Her long braid fell over the faded blue dress that once belonged to her mother, and she had turned her head toward the window. She couldn't see, but she knew how heavy the snow was falling, which direction the wind was blowing from, and from which corner of the window the cold was seeping in. Inside was small but tidy. No clock, no calendar, only routines. Jonas started the day with his axe. Eleanor cleaned the house by touch. Everything followed the rhythm of silence. And that silence had become so constant that even saying a name could echo like an explosion. That morning, the snow was unusually heavy. Before stepping outside, Jonas threw the deerskin coat hanging by the door over his shoulder. Under the soft shadow of Eleanor's quiet harp melody, he stepped out with the creak of the door. Each step echoed beneath the snow, the layer under his boots groaning softly. The snow hadn't spoken like this in a long time. When he heard the first scream, his axe froze midair. It was like even the wind struggled to digest the sound. It wasn't an animal's howl, nor a human cry for help. It was a layered kind of pain, a scream where metal, flesh, and fear met. Jonas's face tightened. He swallowed his frosty breath. Somewhere in the forest, an old bear trap still lay forgotten. Left by hunters years ago, no one had come back for it. He had once meant to get rid of it, but life had pulled him in other directions. He threw the axe over his shoulder. When the scream came a second time, he pinpointed the direction. As he followed the snow-covered trail through the trees, the forest that had been silent for years seemed to breathe again. Fresh footprints marked the snow. Someone or something had passed through here, and it was still alive. When he reached him, he first saw a still shape. He thought it was a body, but then the figure moved. It was a man, young, shirtless, wrapped only in thick pieces of fur. His left leg was caught in the rusty bear trap. A deep cut had painted the snow red with blood. His skin was bronze, his hair long and black. His eyes were half shut, but inside them burned a fire that hadn't given up. Jonas just stood there for a moment. His eyes narrowed. Memories he'd buried for years, gunfire, bloody hands, friends dying in his arms came flooding back. That face, that tribe. He recognized him. From a people the past refused to forget. Comanche. The man whispered, barely audible, "Help." Jonas's hands gripped the axe tightly. He hesitated. As snow fell from the trees onto his shoulder, he made his decision. He knelt. While trying to pry open the rusty metal, he noticed the man clenching his teeth but not making a sound. His pride was stronger than the pain. "What's your name?" Jonas asked, as his hand was soaked with blood. "Liam," the man said through gritted teeth. When the trap opened, the sound it made was so loud it was like the forest flinched. Jonas lifted him onto his back. As the footprints trailed behind, life returned to the silence. When they reached the cabin, Eleanor was already standing. She couldn't see, but she sensed something had changed inside. She moved toward the man by feel. She flinched when her hand first touched him, but she wasn't afraid. From the look on her face, she understood he was hurt and that her father had entered the cabin holding his breath for the first time. "Water. Hot water. Cloth," Jonas said, his voice tired and shaken. Eleanor was already moving. The cabin was quiet through the night, but it was no longer the familiar kind of quiet. It was uneasy and shifting. Liam twisted under warm blankets, muttering in a foreign tongue. Eleanor sat beside him, feeling his fevered forehead with her palm. She couldn't see, but in that moment, she saw the world more clearly than anyone. Around midnight, Liam barely opened his eyes and spoke a word that stopped everything. Eleanor. The young woman froze. She had never said her name, and the man couldn't have known it. Jonas looked up. It was Eleanor who broke the silence first. How do you know my name? Before closing his eyes again, Liam whispered, I remember. That moment wasn't just the opening of a trap, it was the unlocking of a story buried for years. And that story was carrying another secret, waiting beneath the snow. Morning came with a gray light. It wasn't sunlight, nor was it a light that promised hope. It was the kind of day that seemed to rise just to exist. The wind was still hitting the snow-covered windows, and a low howl slipped in through the chimney. Inside the cabin, there was tension left over from the night, like everything had been said but nothing had been understood. Liam's face was pale. His forehead was covered in beads of sweat. Eleanor had been sitting at his side since the early hours. With just her fingertips, she could still feel the fever on his skin. Bandages were changed, water was boiled, soup was heated. Jonas sat in a corner, silently repeating that one word he'd heard during the night Eleanor over and over in his mind. How did Liam know her name? Had their paths crossed before? Or was there a darker connection? He picked up the axe by the door and stepped outside. The snow was still knee-deep. There were more footprints than the day before. Jonas knelt down. He studied the fresh tracks that formed circles in the snow. Someone had been walking around the cabin, not just once, but over and over throughout the night. And that someone was a stranger. Inside, while Eleanor sat quietly by Liam's side, the man opened his eyes. They still looked tired, but now there was no fever, just awareness. His gaze locked straight onto Eleanor. I don't know you, the woman said, her voice hoarse but steady. But you said my name. Liam lifted his head with effort. Years ago, there was a man. He always traveled with a little girl. She was blind, but strong. That man carried a burden. He was silent, someone on the run. I saw them as they passed. I didn't know back then. But her name, your name stuck in my mind. Was it my father? Eleanor asked, her voice now just a whisper. Liam looked down. Maybe. It was a long time ago. When Jonas came back inside, he stood at the doorway with his shotgun in hand. His snow boots were still covered in fresh tracks. Someone was here last night, he said. They walked around us. More than once. Eleanor took a deep breath. Are they watching us? Jonas nodded. Either you or him. He looked over at Liam. I don't think your past is going to stay buried out here. Liam sat up with difficulty. If it's the ones after me, they won't stop. It's half revenge, half hunt. From both my people and yours. Jonas stayed quiet. He looked at Eleanor. He'd spent years protecting her. He chose this cabin, this silence, this loneliness for her. And now, that silence was shattering. By noon, Eleanor stepped outside for the first time. Not with Jonas's help, but on her own. She used a stick instead of a cane, carefully measuring each step. The snow came up to her ankles, but she didn't care. Her senses had sharpened. She could feel the crunch of the snow, the direction of the wind, the metallic scent in the air. Ever since Liam came to the cabin, she had changed too. She was no longer someone who waited. She was someone searching. She heard a snap between the trees. Sharp and quick. Then, breathing. Footsteps. She turned around, but saw nothing though she felt it. Her blindness didn't stop her from sensing the darkness around her. Her steps quickened. By the time she reached the cabin again, she was out of breath. Jonas and Liam were inside. Someone's coming, she said. More than one. They're not hiding. They're making noise on purpose. Jonas grabbed the rifle and stepped to the window. Outside, 3 figures slowly emerged from under the trees. Their faces were covered, but their walk was familiar. One of them had once stepped out of Jonas's past and left him haunted by nightmares. Liam moved to the window. His eyes narrowed. One of them might be my brother, he said, but he's not mine anymore. They've all made me their enemy now. Jonas closed his eyes. The thought in his mind had a distant name, war. By nightfall, the 3 figures were gone, but their tracks remained in the snow. Liam turned to Eleanor. I can't risk you, he said. I have to leave. Eleanor shook her head. No. If you go, I'll never find you again. I may not have eyes, but your voice, your touch, your breath, they've all become my guide. That night, Jonas didn't sleep. He sat by the fire, finishing an old carving in his hands. He turned over a necklace that had once belonged to his daughter's mother. And by dawn, he made a decision. Because when the past comes knocking, you either lock the door or open it. and decide for yourself who gets to come in. When morning came, the cabin felt heavy and still, like it had just woken from a deep sleep. But this stillness wasn't peaceful, it was the silence of something about to break. Outside, the snow was lighter than the night before, but the air was sharper, more threatening. Jonas moved to the window. There were new tracks in the snow, some old, some fresh. It looked like someone had circled the cabin, then vanished back into the forest. Inside, Eleanor was bent over the stove, warming tea with her hands. Her bright eyes stared into nothing, as usual, but her face was set with resolve. She hadn't slept all night, had checked on Liam several times. She'd memorized the rhythm of his breathing, his restless movements in sleep, the foreign words that fell from his lips. Everything was starting to fall into a pattern, but patterns never last long. Jonas broke the morning silence with the first sentence. "Today, I'm cleaning the guns. I don't think the rifle's going to be enough." Eleanor didn't answer, but the muscles in her face tensed slightly. "They're coming back, aren't they?" she asked. Jonas nodded. 3 men gave us a warning yesterday. Tomorrow there could be 4. Or more. The danger's not outside anymore, it's inside. For both you and him. Just then, the door creaked open. Liam stood there on crutches. Weak, but upright. His eyes were on Jonas. "I'm not running," he said. "But if I stay, war comes to your home. I've lived with that, I don't think you should have to." Jonas picked up his rifle and laid it on the table. "You staying isn't the issue. But anyone who stays here carries an invitation to a nightmare in their pocket." Eleanor walked in. "War isn't here because Liam's here. War is here because the outside is still full of hate. And inside, you're both still afraid to care." Jonas said nothing. His whole life, he believed in protecting. He'd stayed silent, run, hidden for the sake of protecting. But now he was starting to realize that protecting didn't always mean building walls. Sometimes it meant letting things in, letting them pass, letting them grow. That afternoon, Liam insisted on going outside. Jonas didn't want him to, but when Eleanor said she'd go with him, he backed off. Outside, the air was harsh, but for the first time, the sun cast soft shadows across the snow. Liam was carving something small with a knife, a tiny bird. Eleanor sat beside him, feeling each new detail with her fingertips. "In your people?" Eleanor asked. "How do you know when someone is meant to stay forever?" Liam smiled, a tired peace on his face. "If they can be quiet together, they can live together. Sharing silence isn't easy." Eleanor lowered her head. "Every moment I don't talk to you is when I hear you the most." But that peace didn't last long. A sound came from the trees. It wasn't a whisper or a murmur, it approached like something thorned. Jonas cracked the cabin door. 3 riders stood at the edge of the forest. They weren't the same men. They carried rifles and wore anger on their backs. This time, they weren't here to watch. They were here for a result. Jonas stepped out. Eleanor's whisper followed him. "Be careful." "What do you want?" he asked, his voice marked with the cracks of age. The man in front spoke. "Is someone named Liam here? He needs to come with us. He's a traitor who stabbed our people in the back. You can't run from blood." Jonas didn't raise his rifle, but he didn't lower his gaze either. "He's healing here. He hasn't hurt anyone else." The man smiled. "Yet." At that moment, Liam appeared. He let go of his crutches, forced himself to stand. "I'm here," he said, "but I'm not going with you." The other men dismounted. One held a knife, another a short rifle. Eleanor instinctively stepped in front of Liam. She couldn't see, but with her hands she could read the threats in the air. "If you hurt me, they won't stop," she said. "This house isn't a shelter, it's a threshold." The men paused. Liam called out from behind her. "If you came here to kill me, at least be honest. A lot of blood has been spilled, but these hands don't carry weapons anymore. If you came to cast a shadow over the life of a blind woman, then you've already lost." The forest went quiet. Even the birds seemed to fall silent. Something broke in that moment, either the threat or the will behind it. After a few more seconds of silence, the riders backed off. One simply said, "We'll be back." Their steps faded into the snow. Jonas lowered the rifle. Liam was breathing hard, but his eyes were clear. Eleanor was still standing firm. Her hands rested on Liam's chest. She could feel his heart. As Jonas walked back inside, he said only one thing. "If they come back, this house won't be a battlefield, it'll be a grave. And I can't bury one more child." Eleanor turned, her voice shaking. "Then maybe we need to bury something else, Papa. Like fear, like loneliness." When night fell, The cabin was lit only by the faint glow of the oil lamp. Outside was foggy. The snow had stopped, but the wind carried howls from the forest, slamming them into the cabin walls like a message from something unknown drawing near. Jonas was cleaning his rifle. Every movement was slow and deliberate. Liam stood by the window, crutches to the side, his eyes locked on the distance. Eleanor sat by the stove, touching the wooden bird toy in her hands with her fingertips. She hadn't spoken a single word all day, but her silence wasn't from fear, it came from being trapped in a deep, heavy thought. The threat she felt wasn't her first. But this time, for the first time, she felt like she had to make a choice, to stay, to run, or to stand her ground. Liam turned around. "I have to go," he said in a whisper. "Not to protect you, but staying here now puts you in more danger. Those men will come back, and this time they won't hold back." Eleanor didn't lift her head, only her lips moved. "And now that I've finally wanted to walk beside someone, you choose to run." Liam stayed silent. His eyes shifted to Jonas. The old man was watching him, but there was no judgment in his gaze, only exhaustion. Maybe he was staying quiet so he wouldn't drag someone else into a war he once couldn't escape. Then Jonas spoke. "I've spent years in this forest. I know every bird's call, every tremble of the leaves. But today, what I heard wasn't from nature. A group of men. They're coming tonight. I saw their tracks. They're waiting for the dark. And when they come, it won't be to talk, it'll be to destroy." Eleanor stood up. "How much time do we have?" Jonas looked to the window. "Maybe a few hours. Maybe less." Liam stepped forward. "I'll draw them away. Go to the road, leave tracks. They'll follow me. Leave you alone." "No," Jonas said. "This isn't just about you anymore. They're afraid of anyone different, anyone who thinks freely, anyone who crosses a line. You're the target, but their aim is us. I've spent my life trying to protect everything by staying quiet. But sometimes protecting doesn't mean staying silent, it means standing and pushing back." Eleanor stood tall. Her eyes didn't work, but her voice was clear. "Then we stay." And the preparations began. Jonas had no arsenal, but his mind was still sharp, and the traps were still in place. He dug a narrow trench in front of the door. He placed wooden reinforcements against the windows. Eleanor tore old curtains into makeshift bandages. Liam, moving with his crutches, found a spearhead behind the stove and sharpened it into readiness. Before the night fully settled, the wind changed. A faint crack outside meant the forest was waking up. An owl hooted. Then silence fell. And in the wild, there's nothing more dangerous than silence. Even the animals were hiding. Silence had smelled the presence of man. The first shadow appeared in the window, a black silhouette behind a tree. Then another. 3, 4. Jonas counted up to 8. No flashes of weapons, but they each carried darkness in their hands. Not just as punishment. Maybe the execution of a decision made long ago. Jonas raised his rifle, fired a warning shot through the window. The blast split the dark. There was confusion among the trees, but no retreat. This wasn't a threat. It was a challenge. They wanted this fight. The door wasn't knocked on, it wasn't even tested gently. A stone came first, then a bottle. Glass shattered. It didn't catch fire, but its scent threatened enough. Oil, gunpowder, burning, a night of fire. Jonas stood behind the door, reloading the rifle. Liam dropped to his knees, planting the spear into the ground. "If they come in," he said, "they'll have to go through me first." Eleanor stood in the center of the cabin. She held no weapon, but a blind woman standing like a wall between her home and the enemy. She was the sharpest mirror those men could face. The door took the first blow. The second was stronger. Jonas fired. Someone screamed into the dark. The third strike cracked the door. The fourth would break it. And at that moment, Eleanor stepped forward. "Enough," she shouted, her voice cutting through the night. "Is a blind woman what you're so afraid of? I may not have eyes, but I can see exactly what you are. Nothing more than cowards hiding in the dark." A silence fell. The men outside hesitated. Liam stood up and moved to Eleanor, taking her hand. Then a voice came from outside. A voice they didn't recognize. "That's enough," someone yelled from the crowd. "This is an honor. This is an execution." A crack formed among the men. 2 of them backed away. The rest were uncertain. Their leader stepped forward, but now he was alone. Jonas raised the rifle. "If you take one more step toward this house, you'll die alone," he said. The leader clenched his jaw, but the dark had abandoned him. He turned. vanished into the forest with the others. This time, they were really gone. The silence behind the door felt sacred. Jonas dropped to the ground. His eyes were filled with tears even as he held onto the rifle. Eleanor said nothing, but her hands held tightly to Liam's trembling ones. And that night, for the first time, the cabin held not the silence of war but the silence of victory. In the final hours of the night, the wind began to slow. The tracks in the snow were already starting to fade beneath a thin new layer. Maybe no battle had broken out, but the silence left behind brought no comfort. Because by now, they all knew, this story wasn't just about a bear trap. What had snapped shut wasn't just flesh, it was the heavy chains of the past. At first light, Jonas stepped outside. The snow was still knee-deep, but the sky was clear and the air was still. As he straightened his body through the aches, he felt more than just exhaustion. He felt the weight of an inevitable reckoning with the past. When he came back in, Eleanor had lit the stove and was quietly making tea. Liam sat in a corner, turned toward the window, lost in thought. There was tension in the room. Things that needed saying hung in the air, words that had been delayed for years. Jonas broke the silence. "Your mother," he said, turning to Eleanor. Her name was Anna, a beautiful, fearless woman, but everyone thought she was weak because she was quiet. Eleanor turned her head slightly. "You've never spoken about her. Because talking hurt just as much as living. When I lost her, I ran from the city. Not just to protect you, but to keep myself alive. But this cabin didn't protect us, Eleanor. It only hid us from time." Liam turned around. "I saw you once," he said to Jonas. "Years ago, in a border town near our lands. You were there, fighting with a man. A little girl was in your arms. She couldn't see, but she didn't cry. She just held on to you." Jonas's eyes widened. "That was you," he whispered. Liam nodded. "I was just a kid back then too. But I never forgot you. Or that moment." Eleanor's voice hit like a wall. "That moment? The day my father ran. The night we lost my mother." Silence grew heavy again. "Yes," Jonas said, lowering his head. "That night, I buried both your mother and the past." Liam stepped closer. "And now the past is knocking at the door." Jonas nodded. "But this time I let it in." Eleanor stood, her hands gripping the wall for balance, then stepped in front of Liam. "I heard you, felt you. You came with your voice, stayed with your hands. But what about you?" she asked, looking directly at him, even if she couldn't see. "Do you want to stay here? Even though you can't see me?" Liam's voice was rough, but clear. "When I first saw you, I didn't see anything. But what I heard reminded me of what home feels like. Trust, silence, your hands. Maybe for the first time, I felt like I belonged somewhere." Eleanor placed her hands over his. "I was born alone in this cabin, but I don't want to die alone. If you're going to stay, stay knowing that." Jonas watched them. His eyes were tired, but they had surrendered. "If he stays," he said softly, "then this time he's not just a guest. He'll be a part of this house, of this story." Just then, the sound of a horse's hooves broke the silence, slicing through the stillness of the morning. Jonas rushed to the window. On the ridge opposite, a lone rider appeared. Color unclear, face covered, but Jonas recognized him at once. "Barlow," he said. "The sheriff." Eleanor's face tensed. Again, Liam took a deep breath. This time he came alone. Jonas stepped outside, rifle slung over his shoulder rather than in hand. He stood at the doorway. Barlow got off his horse. This time, his hands were empty. The usual arrogance was gone from his face, but so was peace. "I came because the talk in town has changed," he said. "They're talking about your daughter, about her choices." Jonas stepped forward. "Those choices are hers, not yours." Barlow nodded. "I didn't come for her. I came for the one she chose." His eyes moved to Liam. "There's a bounty on your head. Not from the men outside town. From your own people." Liam's face tightened. "Who?" Barlow looked away. "Someone who used to be your brother. Not anymore." Jonas narrowed his eyes. "What do you want from us?" "Nothing," said Barlow. "Just bringing you what you need to know. This story isn't over yet. You'll have to make your choice. But whatever you decide, don't come back to town. That place isn't yours anymore." Barlow climbed onto his horse, turned, and rode away as quietly as he'd come. Jonas came back inside. Liam was still standing by the window. Eleanor had picked up the wooden bird toy again from the floor. "No matter what," she said, "this house is no longer a shell. This house will be a vow." Jonas nodded. "Then, that vow better be ready to pay the price for everything." And that night, even without words, They all knew the final battle was near. But this time, the enemy wasn't only outside. The shadows of the past were waiting for them too. Morning came with an unusual stillness. There were no birds singing, no rustling wind. Everything was waiting. The trees, the snow, the sky, as if they had sensed an approaching decision and were holding their breath. The cabin was quiet, but the tension was tangible. No one was speaking because everything that needed to be said had already been said. Now it was time for action. Liam had gotten up before the first light. He'd gone outside to cut a few branches with an axe, then stack them one by one around the cabin. Eleanor had listened in silence, trying to understand what he was thinking just by his footsteps. Jonas sat by the fire, flipping through an old war journal. With each line, it felt like he was carving another scar into his past. Hours passed. The silence remained unbroken, until the echo of distant hooves began pressing into the ground. The first came alone, then 3, 5, 8, then too many to count. Horses left tracks in the snow, only to be covered soon after by the new, pressing wind. But the wind this time seemed to have chosen to become a storm. Jonas picked up his rifle. This time, war had come right to the door. Eleanor stood by the stove, wearing her mother's old blue dress. In her hand, she held the little wooden bird Liam had carved. Her eyes still didn't see, but her heart read the world like a compass. Liam was ready to go outside, but this time, he wouldn't go alone. "This is my past," Jonas said, "but it's your future. You shouldn't be caught in between." "No, Papa," Eleanor said, fearless for the first time. "Your past made the path for us. If we're going to stand here today, we'll stand together. All three of us." The door wasn't knocked on. This time, it was simply opened. Leading the group was the man Liam had once called brother. His hair was short, his eyes burned with hatred. His face carried a weariness that looked like he'd been drinking pain for years. "Liam," he said, "you're now a name that betrayed your people. If you stay in this cabin, you bury not just our honor but our name." Liam stepped forward. "If protecting honor means holding a blade, if denying love is what it takes, then I've already let go of that name." Jonas stood beside them. "We don't want war here, but if you've come to take us, know this, it won't be easy." The man signaled. Hands moved toward weapons. But in that moment, Eleanor stepped forward. A silence pierced everyone. "My eyes may be blind," she said, "but I can see each of you. I see the armor you've built from fear, the wounds you've buried with hate." Liam remembered my name without ever hearing it. "And you've forgotten your own." The man hesitated for a moment. "You think he saved you?" he shouted. "He's chained you, tied you to this place." Eleanor shook her head. "No one chained me. For the first time, I chose. Not with my blindness, but with my heart. And I chose him." At that moment, Jonas tore a page from his old war journal and placed it in his pocket. He remembered, for one last time, what war truly cost. "Wars are easy," Jonas said, "but peace, just holding on to it, takes courage." There was another silence. Then something unexpected happened. One of the men lowered his rifle. Then another. They had come like a storm, but words had cut deeper than bullets. Liam's brother stepped back. His eyes no longer held rage, only emptiness. "This is your path now," he said, "but our people won't forgive you. Maybe not even me." And he turned and left. The snow began falling again. The sound of hooves faded. The cabin was buried in silence once more. But this time, it was the echo of peace, not fear. When they came back inside, Jonas set his rifle in the corner. Eleanor's hands were still trembling, but her face stood strong. Liam looked at her. "I wanted to protect you," he said. "No," said Eleanor. "You dared to see me, and I chose you." Jonas stepped in. "This house is no longer just a shelter. This house is your home now." Liam pulled a piece of cloth from his pocket. Drawn on it in charcoal was a bird symbol. He placed it in Eleanor's palm. "Let this be the sign of our path." Then Jonas pulled a dusty box from an old drawer. Inside was a worn blue ribbon from Eleanor's mother. He tied it in her hair. "Your mother's color, may it be the bond of your new life." And that night, no gunshots were heard in the cabin, no screams. Only the crackling of the stove and the sound of 3 hearts beating in the same rhythm. Outside, it was snowing. But this time, not like punishment, like mercy. Sometimes snow didn't fall just to erase old tracks, but to open a new path. And this time, the snow had chosen to protect them. We're just a few steps away from reaching our first 1,500 subscribers, our growing family. From the bottom of our hearts, thank you to everyone who's brought us this far. With your support, we grow stronger with every story. If you haven't subscribed yet, now is the perfect time.